Okay, we're live. So today I just want to address a question that I've seen floating around out there in the media about whether a parent can be sued if their child is unvaccinated and another child who is vaccinated gets ill, and the parent of that child believes that the reason is because of that unvaccinated child. So there's a lot of anger and fear out there driving most of the recent flare-up about vaccination debate that periodically consumes the media. I've seen a lot of talking heads shouting for these kinds of lawsuits to begin. So let's just explore the reality of whether that can really happen. So the short of it is, this is America, and you can get sued for anything in America. But on a more serious note, the reality and the practicality of a lawsuit like this would most likely mean that it wouldn't happen. I can't say that it's impossible, though. So put very simply, there are two major hurdles to this kind of litigation. The first would be the legal threshold, the threshold required to bring the suit, and that's going to be in the duty that's owed to people around you. And the second major hurdle is going to be the cost of something like this. So I'll explore each one of those in a little bit more detail. First, looking at the theory of causation here, the theory of the tort that would be brought. Most likely this would be brought as a negligence claim. It could be brought as a battery claim, but in general, the law is not going to recognize that a person has a duty to another person to not act. So it's called an act of omission. Unless there's a special relationship, like a mother to a child or something of that nature, if there's a statute that mandates a person act, like a doctor or something of that nature. In general, the law does not mandate that we act. The law will potentially impose liability if you do act, but there's a very big difference, and in general, we're not going to require that people act when it comes to other people. So to be held liable for injuring another person, it must be more likely than not that your action caused their injury and that you failed in a responsibility to protect them. The law doesn't generally recognize this act of omission without the special relationship. So also, a person that doesn't vaccinate their children or doesn't vaccinate themselves generally would be claiming an exemption. And so whether or not a person's action or lack of action is reasonable is going to be viewed through those eyes. So exemptions to vaccine mandates wouldn't exist if they were deemed unreasonably risky for public health by legislatures. So arguably, a person with an exemption could not be found responsible for the spread of disease by exercising a right that's provided by the very people that are charged with protecting the public health to begin with. So they're given that right and they're exercising it, and that should be considered a reasonable thing to do. So, just moving on from there, if a suit were to survive that legal threshold and be able to proceed through litigation, the next big hurdle is going to be the expense. So this is going to be a battle of the experts. They're going to spout off science, they're going to debunk things, they're going to talk about lack of evidence. It's going to be expensive to prove where the injury, the illness originated, to link it back to that unvaccinated child, but it's not impossible. It's just another expense. So this is going to just have a huge bill when it comes to expert testimony, medical examinations, things of that nature. In this case, it's not going to be cheap. So there's a huge difference between having a viable legal theory and finding a lawyer to bring your case. So, people that have experienced medical malpractice can definitely tell you about this. The cost associated with a case can make it prohibitively expensive to bring or to find a lawyer that's able or willing to litigate that for you. So somebody's got to pay those costs somewhere. Most experts aren't going to work for free, just like lawyers wouldn't work for free, just like the people that are paying the lawyers generally aren't working for free. So in a situation like this, a person's going to either have to front the cost themselves or find a lawyer that really believes they have a truly sound legal theory and they'll be able to make some money off of this case, or that the lawyer feels so passionately about this topic that they're going to be able to just front the costs themselves and potentially eat it if this lawsuit doesn't go anywhere. You might be able to find a nonprofit that would be able to pick this up, but in my experience, people looking towards nonprofits for litigation, that's a pretty high threshold as well, because there is such a great need for people to be represented when they're injured. So nonprofit organizations are really overwhelmed, just like most of other organizations in this economy these days. So this is why I'm saying it's unlikely that a person will be sued if their children are not vaccinated and one of their children's peers becomes ill, but it's not impossible. So the flip side of that, of course, is for those of you who are not vaccinating your children, if they happen to be around a child who has been vaccinated and the vaccine sheds and your child gets ill, can you still sue that person for vaccinating their child? It's basically the same legal analysis, but the hefty weight of science and medicine are not on your side. So that's going to make an even more challenging, if not impossible, barrier to a person who believes their child is ill from a vaccine shedding, because the courts are going to defer to scientific and medical experts, regardless of whether those experts are right or wrong. This is just the way the court is set up. They're not supposed to be legislating from the bench. They're not supposed to be activists. And so they will look to the experts and they will apply the law that they are given and in the social context that they are given to the best of their ability. And they may make a call from the bench to say, we don't know that this is the best science, we don't know that this is the best law, and we highly urge the legislators or whoever it is to look into this and maybe change things because we think that this ruling is unfair, but it is by the letter of the law. That has happened in the past. So that's where we are, basically. Nothing is impossible, but things are unlikely here. So where does that leave us? If a parent chooses to exercise the right not to vaccinate their children, then basically I would strongly recommend consulting with an expert to make sure that the exemption that is claimed is legally sound and that you're truly protecting yourself and your children. All parents, regardless of whether they're vaccinating their children or not, should take reasonable precautions to prevent the spread of disease. So this includes things like, let's not hang out with our friends that just got back from Disneyland, for a little bit, just to make sure that they're not infected or carriers of the disease. Or, if we're getting back from our international trip, let's not hop off the plane and bring Junior to the daycare with sniffles and a fever. Let's do lots of hand washing, things like that. Let's just use good old common sense that perhaps used to be employed decades ago by our parents or our grandparents or their parents and grandparents. And that's really the essence of parenting here, is making the decisions that you think are best for your children and for your family, and then using common sense to protect them and do the best that you can for everyone around them as well. So the bottom line is that parenting is hard, and everyone is trying to do the best for their own children and their family. And even when we have differences of opinion or parenting style, we should recognize that every parent is making choices with the best interests of their children in mind. We all love our children. We all want them to thrive. So truly empowered parents are going to make decisions that are not based in fear. They're going to do their homework, and they're going to do what they think is best. And, it may sound funny coming from a lawyer, but I don't think litigation is the best answer all the time. The best answer generally is common sense, taking personal responsibility, and educating ourselves. Those are the best tools that we all have to avoid being sued or being injured.